So probably all heard about global warming and the question about whether it exists or not. I believe that it does exist, and there's a lot of evidence to prove that. It was concluded by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, known as IPCC, that this increase, there's in fact an increase of the Earth's temperature, and it is most likely due to high concentrations of greenhouse gases. The burning of fossil fuels releases CO2, and the only way that fossil fuels are burned are by humans. And so this causes an increase in the Earth's temperature within the atmosphere. And it's caused by CO2 trapping more heat into the atmosphere. So we will take a look at the scientists' opinion on the matter and the CO2 emissions data that has been collected by the scientists and the effects of global warming. So experts on the subject believe that global warming does exist. Climatologists and other scientists believe that global warming is occurring and humans are the main cause. A survey conducted by CNN indicates that 97% of climatologists believe that global warming is occurring and that humans are the main cause. They say that because the fossil fuels that have been burning for the past 200 years, ever since the industrialization of many countries, it's caused an increased level of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is trapping more heat. So another survey of 3,146 Earth scientists conducted by the University of Illinois had majority of them agree that average global temperatures have increased in the last 200 years, and then 82% of them believe that human activity is the main cause. A professor from that university says the debate on the authenticity of global warming and the role played by human activity is largely non-existent among those who understand nuances and scientific basis of the long-term climate process. So what he's saying is the experts on the subject have no question about it that it is occurring, and that the only people that question that whether it's occurring or not are people who are not experts and uninformed about the data, I guess. So there's evidence to support the scientists' claim. We'll take a look at that. CO2 emissions have increased over the last 100 years, and the average temperatures have increased up to 1.5 degrees since 1880, according to the Goddard Institute for Space Studies. In a document called An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore, he compares patterns of carbon dioxide in the past 650,000 years, and he compares that to the temperatures within those years, and he sees a direct correlation between amount of CO2 and the average temperatures. And so it can be concluded that the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere actually causes an increase in the temperature of the atmosphere. So burning of fossil fuels causes CO2 emissions, which is causing global warming. And so in that documentary by Al Gore, the past 650,000 years have had steady amounts of CO2 as well as steady temperatures. Average temperatures were steady. They didn't deviate too much from, I guess, the mean. And so in the past 200 years, it's been kind of spiking. So, according to Tha, who's a author and professor in the Department of Geophysical Sciences at the University of Chicago, says the rate of exchange between the atmosphere and the land biosphere and between the atmosphere and oceans are about 20 times higher than the fossil fuel CO2 releases. This may seem reassuring that humans are not dispersing as much CO2 as like natural processes, but it's the fact that this CO2 is coming from a new source, which is fossil fuels that are being burnt, and so the Earth's atmosphere has never experienced this type of CO2 releasing from fossil fuels, so it's reacting in a way that well, it's reacting, and it's not a stable reaction, so it's causing, I guess, chaos in the atmosphere and fluctuations in the temperature. So, the CO2 emissions we are producing upsets the natural cycle of the Earth. It can be argued that this global warming is affecting us today with all the hurricanes that are going on, and there's several heat waves that occurred in the past like 5-10 years. You could say this is a short amount of time, but then there have been several other heat waves that have occurred in the past 100 years, but this is more relevant to us in the past 10 years. Although the effects of global warming are thought to be long-term, we do see evidences that it's affecting us today. Like the rapidly decreasing glaciers and polar ice caps prove to be problematic in that they're causing sea levels to rise, and that there's animals that live on the polar ice caps that have to adapt to this lower amount of, or they're the space that well, the polar ice caps are shrinking, so they have to live in a smaller environment, and they have to adapt to that, as well as it's affecting the whole ecosystem that they rely on. And so there's this melting and increase in temperature of the atmosphere and the Earth is causing the bleaching of coral reefs. This is destroying the ecosystem that depends on these coral reefs. Scientists believe that the increase in extreme weather events can be the effect of global warming. There have been record-breaking amounts of stronger and more violent hurricanes and storms. As the ocean temperature increases, it causes the wind velocity and moisture of the content of these hurricanes to increase, making them more violent. So you can take a look at the Hurricane Katrina. It started off as I guess Category 1, and as soon as it passed over the Gulf of Mexico, it turned into a Category 3. The Gulf of Mexico, it has warmer temperature water, and so it picked up a lot more energy from there. And you could say this is kind of a side effect of global warming. There have been several heat waves that have occurred, and they're occurring more frequently. And in the summer of 2003 in Europe, they experienced 35,000 deaths because of a heat wave. And in that same year, India had 1,400 deaths with the same heat wave. So, after looking at the scientific data of the history of carbon dioxide and the conclusion that scientists agree that global warming exists and we are the cause of it, it is a situation mainly caused by humans, and it is a real problem that we should face.